Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back. This will be, in fact, I think the last time that you will hear me talking, because today I'm going to cover this topic of mobile device forensics and refer a bit to computer forensics, but only in passing. And then after that, I've again set a movie for you. This is one of the best cases for you to watch as a conclusion to your class, and especially pertinent to our discussion about mobile device forensics, because it's a case which hinged absolutely upon analysis of cell phone of data. So that you can do in place of your class on Monday. And before your exam, which is on the Tuesday of 14, 13, 12, I think Tuesday the 11th, I will notify you of a class where we can set up a question time in case there's material that you want to go over with me. For that class, the best thing to do is to actually send me an email with specific questions that I can answer. It's sometimes a little bit difficult to answer complex questions just on the fly. If it's a complex question, then it's better that I have it beforehand so that I can actually give you a clear-cut answer. Okay, so mobile devices. Who doesn't have a mobile device in their pocket or close by them at the moment? There's a very important point about mobile devices, and that is they're mobile. You can carry them with you. And if that mobile device is on, then it is actually a record is being kept of its location. And it may be recording a lot of other stuff as well that you might not be aware of. That's lesson number one, to get clear about mobile devices. Lesson number two about mobile devices: if that mobile device is on, it is extremely difficult to erase information which it accumulates. Even when people delete material from a phone or from a computer, in actual fact, it's not really deleted. It does not necessarily disappear. It can be located and it can be deciphered by a skillful technician within limits, but for a very long time, at least, it is available. So it is no wonder then that mobile devices have proved to be a source of very, very important forensic data, because if somebody is using a mobile device, carrying a mobile device with them, traveling with a mobile device, it is possible to track their path as long as that phone is on. If the phone is off, then it does not accumulate information and it does not provide information either. But people seldom think to switch their phones off because they don't realize that they are being tracked, but they are. So, sorry. So our cell phones work on a cellular system. Well, we're all used to that term cellular, but what does it mean? Well, the cell that they are referring to is a network of relatively short distance apart, towers which are sending and receiving information. And they are spaced strategically. They are very low power, so they need to be present in high numbers. In the city, for example, there are cell phone towers on many, many, many of the buildings because they have a relatively short range. And that is what is providing all the data to your phone, and your phone in turn is talking to those towers. When you're speaking on a phone, what you're doing is you're sending out a message. It is sent as radio waves, but it is digitally coded now, And when you hear somebody talking to you, your phone is receiving information, which is being sent to you by a tower. And the tower that is corresponding with you is the strongest tower within that cell network. And what happens is that as you travel, your phone continually sends out little testing messages. They're called pings. And the testing message is received and interpreted by towers. And the towers talk to one another, and the one which is closest to your phone picks up your phone and will interact with it as long as it is within its range. And as it begins to fade, of course, you're pinging the next tower and so on. And so you move from place to place. We've all had the experience that when you travel in the countryside, for example, you lose cell phone coverage. And that is because the towers are too far apart. They can no longer talk to you. Their range is too short. But your phone is pinging the whole time. And as soon as you get near another tower, that tower will pick you up. But what's very important is that the towers are keeping a record. Towers, that they keep a record of that information. That information is automatically transmitted to the distributor, to the company that is providing you with service. And that is kept on record, and that is public record. Well, it's not really public. It actually belongs to the telephone company, but or it is not your info. It does not belong to you. There is information on your phone which does belong to you, but there is other information which is not, which is out in the public and can be accessed. It has to be accessed with a warrant to the company, but nonetheless, it can be accessed. And by following which towers are picking up your particular telephone, your particular cell phone, you can actually track to a fairly high degree of accuracy, not within meters, but certainly, to within a vicinity. It can be tracked where your cell phone has been. If you switch that cell phone off, it stops pinging, and that information is then lost. Okay, so the technology of cell phones has advanced so rapidly, it's scarcely believable. But even in the 90s and right up until the early 2000s, in actual fact, what we would now regard as relatively primitive cell phone systems were being used. Now, we started off, the first portable phones were even larger. This is a 1G phone. This is the first generation. And this was an advanced 1G phone. This was a relatively small one. If you want to see what they look like, go and have a look at those old episodes of Seinfeld. And you'll see them walking around with these huge things that they hold up to their heads. Well, that is relatively recent. Those were analog. They were not digital. They were not transmitting their information in terms of bytes, of computer bytes of information. They were transmitting their and receiving their information as analog, as radio waves, the way a normal radio would work. So effectively, they were advanced walkie-talkies, and they did nothing except talk. But because they were using radio waves, they didn't require the extensive cell phone networks that the digital systems, the cellular systems do. So the next generation were the first, I guess we kind of think of them as being computer phones, because they are communicating in terms of bytes of information, byte units of information. And these were the first ones which could be reduced in size, which became reduced in size so that they were easily portable and handheld. And these were things like the BlackBerry and those kinds of devices. They did allow, apart from just being a phone device, they did allow some kind of data communication as well, but they certainly did not allow anything like access to the web or streaming, anything like that. They were really, compared to what we have now, they were relatively primitive devices, but they were tremendously important because they were the first devices which were effectively little computers. And they also began to plug in to the growing extensive cellular networks. So that we begin to see the same kinds of features that we see today. So the 3G phones were the first phones which allowed transmission of broadband data. And it was because of an elaborate system of data exchange called packet switching. And this is what really paved the way for the smartphones, which are nothing but small computers with a phone attached. I mean, small in terms of you can hold it. They are not necessarily small in terms of their memory and of their capability. Even the 3G systems, which we would regard as being very slow and very limited, were revolutionary in that they could allow access, for instance, to the internet. They could allow internet searching, that kind of thing. And they, for that reason, they were extremely popular, but they were only the forerunner to what we are now used, which is the 4G. Some of you may have 5G already, but most of us are using a 4G system. 4G systems are much more advanced. They allow high-speed internet access. They will allow a certain amount of streaming, depending on the device you have. But they really are much like the computer that sits on your desk, except in portable form, and maybe with somewhat less storage memory. But their capabilities are much like those of a computer. This is important in forensics because addressing the extraction of information from these devices, whether it is a computer or whether it is a phone, has become extremely similar. And computer technicians, forensic technicians, are also very often called on to address the issue of extracting information from cell phones, because it uses many of the same techniques. Now, the 5G, which is the coming thing, is essentially very like, the phones would be very like our current phones, excepting that they're extremely high speed. It's as fast as the computer sitting on your desktop. And they will allow high quality imaging, for example, high quality moving imaging, streaming, and very high speed cable communication, that sort of thing. All of them, excepting the 1G, all of them except the 1G are, if you're moving, they are doing the same thing. They are pinging to towers and locking into towers, which will serve them best as the phone is moved. The 4G and then, of course, the 5G. One thing which really distinguishes them from the others is the ability to download apps, complex algorithms which will perform tasks for us on the phone. That makes them just like just like a PC or a Mac, excepting held in your hand. And these mobile phones, they're actually not one thing. There are several devices which are sandwiched together in the one device. And each of those devices, if in a forensic situation, each of those devices may contain different information, which may be useful to the forensic expert. So the first thing is, of course, is this transceiver. That means a transmitter and receiver system, which sends your voice and which receives the voice of somebody else. And that's the first thing that is done. The second is there has to be some sort of interface for internet use. And then there is another device which actually works to communicate with the GPS satellite system. This is an extraordinary system of satellites which circle around the Earth, continually communicating with GPS devices and allowing them to work out exactly where they are on the surface of the planet to a high degree of accuracy. And with that in mind, there is another set of devices which we now very frequently use if you have a car that has a geolocation device, like Garmin or something like that. That's exactly what it is doing. It's also a mobile computer device. And it's communicating with satellites. And very importantly, it keeps a record. It keeps a record of where you have been. As long as it's on, it will keep a record of where it has been, so, which can be backtracked and may be of critical forensic importance. Now, there's another, the GPS device on your phone actually is not the same as the tower pinging. Okay, it's a completely separate system, and you actually have to switch it on. But if you have Google Maps or anything like that, that is when the GPS system is brought into play. That is when it will begin operating. If you have Google Maps and everything switched off, it is not operating. But many of us have the geolocation running in the background without us even thinking about it. It's just there as an app that is running the whole time and accumulating information about where we are and where we have been. And that has very frequently been the downfall of somebody, a perpetrator, who attempted to say they were somewhere else, and their phone shows that they were actually close to the scene of the crime. Okay, so what your phone stores, first of all, it has to be on. That's the first thing. When a forensic expert wants to actually access the material on a phone, there is a certain amount of information which can be gleaned from without requesting permission. So they can go to a phone company and ask permission for access to cell phone records. As far as your personal phone is concerned, you cannot be compelled to switch your phone on if it's off. You cannot be compelled to switch it on and enter a password. That the Supreme Court has said that is private information. However, if a cell phone is taken as evidence and it is on and it is left on, then a lot of the information on it becomes fair game. So, for example, you'll have recorded on your phone all of your call logs, and that says who has called you, who have you called. It also records SMS messages, text of SMS messages. It records your whole internet browser history that you've used your phone for. The recorded messages are present, and even recorded messages, phone message and things that you have erased may be available as well. When you erase a phone message, all that you're doing is you're shunting it from one place in your phone to another. You're freeing up some space for the actual recording part, the recording program to use. But the recorded message may in fact be stored somewhere else. All of your photos, all your video, that becomes available. Your geolocation history, if you've been using GPS, that all becomes available. And also deleted materials, a huge amount of material that we think we have deleted, phone messages, SMSs, even internet history, these sorts of things. If you believe that you have actually deleted them, they're actually still there and they can be extracted, provided the phone was on when it was apprehended as evidence, or you have given permission for the phone to be switched on and you have opened it for examination. What is not recorded, what is absolutely private, what is absolutely not available are phone conversations. Those are not in fact recorded, unless you have actually recorded them yourself, unless you've hit record. But that is not available. It is not available, and that is, even if it was absolutely private, that is privileged information between you and whoever you were talking to, unless it happened that it was recorded somewhere, and then it does become evidentiary. If that phone is locked, or if it was switched off when over a period of time, then access to data is very, very limited, and the amount of data that can be abstracted for that period of time is very limited, in particular because there is this constitutional protection of private information. And you cannot be compelled either to switch your phone on or to give up the password if it is off. So that is an important point. Very, very frustrating for forensic investigators. If, for example, one of the very first things, if somebody has a good defense attorney, the very first thing a defense attorney will ask is that they switch their phone off and give it to the attorney for safekeeping, because then it cannot be used in investigation. If it's seized when it's on and unlocked, then it has to be maintained in that state. And in addition, usually they will make every effort to ensure that the battery doesn't die, that it's fully charged. By the way, even your battery contains information which can be useful to forensic investigators. It contains information about its charging history and things like that. So when the phone is apprehended, let's say it's on and it's unlocked, the person was using it when they were arrested, and it was seized as evidence. Then what is done is you can't now drive off with it, because it will carry on pinging to cell phones, to cell towers, and you'll start to distort the information. So what is done is usually it is transported in what is called a Faraday bag, and a Faraday bag is a shield. It prevents radio waves from reaching it, and so it remains in the state it was at the place where it was apprehended. In addition, they may also include in that they may include a charger or something to keep the phone on until such time as it arrives at the laboratory. So here's a big problem. This whole revolution in mobile devices and in computers, personal computers as well, has taken place over a very short period of time, a couple of decades. And in that short time, thousands upon thousands of operating systems and types of devices and algorithms and apps and everything else have been produced. And that makes forensic digital examination extremely complex. And it is the forensic digital examiner is a person with extensive computer training and extensive training in the abstraction of digital data. It is a science in itself. And that's why, in actual fact, we're just kind of skimming over the surface of it. If this is something that interests you, you might want to contact a college like John Jay College or somewhere like that, where I believe they actually have classes in forensic digital examination. If you're a computer whiz, and this is of your interest, this is a major area of expansion of forensic investigations. There are more than 50,000 types of mobile device in use worldwide. Not only that, a forensic digital examiner may in fact be called on even to examine devices such as 1G devices, because there are areas of the country and areas of the world where that is all that is available because only analog communication is possible. Certainly 2, 3G will still feature from time to time in forensic investigation. And each of those devices has to be understood as an entity on its own. So the digital examiner also has to be able to analyze all of these different parts, the digital signal processors, microprocessors, essentially the computer section, the frequency, the transmitter receiver system, all of the audio components, and even down to the battery. All of these might provide forensic information, and it is up to the forensic digital examiner to be able to extract that. Now that has opened up real problems with an unreasonable search and seizure, because your use of the phone, you might use the phone for extremely privileged purposes. And the most privileged purpose of all on the phone is the phone conversation with somebody else. That is something which nobody has the right to demand access to. Certainly you can ask, what did you say to them? What did you say to whatever? But there's no way to actually get a copy unless the person recorded it themselves. So the seizure and it can be done if there is commission of a crime and the cell phone is present. But under normal circumstances, a warrant would be required to seize the cell phone. But people very frequently in interrogation, they will be asked, will you surrender your phone for examination? And if they do so, then it is fair game. Then it can be fully examined. You can, as I've said several times, you cannot be compelled to switch on your phone. You cannot be compelled to divulge the password. There have been cases. There was one a year or two ago where a cell phone belonging to the victim of a crime, I think of a murder, I can't remember the case exactly. They wanted to access to the phone to see where what the transport basically of the phone and presumably the body, etc. And it required incredible amount of legal wrangling to get there and to get the company, the cell phone company, to actually divulge a password or show them how to break through the password. It was eventually done, but with the utmost reluctance on the part of the company. The cell phone company, they fought it tooth and nail right up to the very, very end. This is regarded with great trepidation. and it's no wonder then that the Supreme Court has become involved. These are the opinions of the court so far. So this is Justice Roberts wrote this opinion. Cell phones are microcomputers that serve a large number of critical uses to people. This is one reason why the court has ruled that law enforcement must have a warrant to search cell phones at a scene. Unlike a piece of paper or a portable item, the information within a cell phone would be equivalent to that contained in large, non-portable items, such as ledgers, diaries, personal computers. In other words, unless the cell phone is seized in commission of a crime, it must be voluntarily handed over, or there must be a warrant for its seizure and for its examination. So there's a link there if you want to go to the full opinion. Okay, so there are levels of examination. This applies not only to cell phones, this applies to computers as well. In fact, this is derived originally from examination of computer information. And the levels are, there's manual extraction. That's the same as somebody sitting as if they were using the phone, flipping through the phone, okay, and opening up things, and just as the owner would. The logical images, those are actual records of what the user sees, but also logical images are kept of what the user has seen. So those can be extracted. Then there is a physical extraction. Physical extraction goes in and it takes, bit by bit, it extracts the computer information from all the file systems. And that includes deleted data. And that can then be made available. Usually they will do this twice as a sort of a verification. And they will take one of those and analyze it and present it in court. And then the other one is available, it will be made available to the defense for analysis. But one of them is what is presented in court. The other is a record of what has been extracted. And what has been deleted is often the most interesting, because that is the stuff that the person thought should not be seen. And it can be seen. Now, the other higher levels are chip off and micro read. These are just very, very technical means of extracting data, and not necessarily the kind of data that we're thinking about. It's not necessarily like the geolocation or whatever, but it's stuff which has been recorded onto the SIM cards and things like that, which might be useful forensically. So this, obviously, the singular importance of the phone is not only that you may actually have communication like SMS or whatever, but that it provides an overlay. It provides a time course, a timeline to events, and it places a person I wouldn't say it places a person, it places the device at certain places at a certain time. And the digital device threads through everything else that we do. And you get geographic records, time records, of course, contact records, who was phoned, and what were the messages on SMSs and things like that. So that's all very useful. But what may also be very useful is when stuff disappears, when calls suddenly stop, when there is a gap in the record. What was happening? Why, all of a sudden, in a normal pattern which has been set up over weeks or months, is that pattern suddenly interrupted? Is that significant in relation to a crime that has taken place? So one of the things that a cell phone investigator will do is look very carefully at the normal patterns that somebody performs in their life. And they will then look at the cell phone records and try to see whether there has been a change. I'll give you an example. This is one which you're going to encounter when you watch the movie that I've recommended. If somebody is regularly in contact with somebody, they have a normal, they have their normal friends, their family that they talk to. So those call records are there. And then some months before a crime takes place, they suddenly start talking to somebody new. And at first they talk once or twice, and then they talk 2 or 3 times a day, and then they talk 5 times a day, 10. Then they're talking back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then the day after a crime, all of a sudden it stops. There's no more communication between those 2 people. Maybe for a week, 2 weeks, there's no further communication. And then there's just one call here, another call there. Why? Well, it may be completely innocent. Maybe they're having an affair or something and they broke up. That could happen. But it is to an investigator, that would be very, very interesting to find out who was this person that they were talking to? What is their cell phone record like? Were they carrying a phone? Where did their phone go? Did those phones meet up and travel somewhere? Was that somewhere anywhere near where a crime took place? These are all really interesting behavioral traits that are revealed in a cell phone record. We don't realize how much we give away by the habits that we develop. We don't realize how much of our habitual behavior is actually recorded in this kind of way. So this is what we refer to as a causal chain of evidence, that it describes the events of a crime in terms of cause and effect. Okay, who meets who? What is the nature of their meeting? What does it lead to? When such and such a thing happens, what happens after that? The cell phone, the mobile device, may be the thing that threads through all of that and allows us to join it up like a string of beads into a coherent story. So that is all that I have to say for the moment about about mobile devices. Just skimmed the surface, but please, will you have a look? Sorry, back here. Sorry. Please, will you have a look at first of all, this link here, which is a reading for you. But then here is the movie that I strongly recommend here, and this is really one of the best forensic cases revolving around cell phone analysis. And by the way, please pay careful attention to the accent of the lady who does the cell phone analysis. She's a fellow South African, so I'm very proud of. So in any case, it's a very, very interesting case, and it's one of the most interesting cases of all of the ones that we have considered. I've enjoyed teaching you despite the difficulties attached to doing it remotely. I've had contact with a number of different students. I've been very, very impressed how people have kept up with the classes and how they've really done their best to do well in tests and everything. Your final test consists, as I've told you before, consists of 2 parts. The first part is a normal class test. That's the stuff which you have not been tested on yet. The second part of your test, of your final, is a comprehensive test. To study for that, go back to the old tests and go through all of the questions and make sure you understand where you got it wrong. Make sure that you understand exactly why you got it wrong and what the correct answer is. Okay, that's the way to study. I will set up a tutorial session sometime before the test, a couple of days before the test, when I'll allow you a question and answer that you can log on if you wish to. Okay, thank you very much. Good luck, and all of you get vaccinated. And until you get vaccinated, make every effort to stay safe.